Hello, Ectosage here on the Sage channel, and I'm here today to present this ship, the Gravity Chariot. It's a gravity-driven ship where you can either sit at the front or sit at the back, and it's basically two separate sections held together by all of these conveyor hinges. It's a mod. It's the only mod used to actually make this ship work. And if we were to actually go ahead and explain the overall workings of the ship, we'll start at the back where we have the main control right here, so you can hop into this lovely little seat in this main body of the ship with a bunch of thrusters. Now these thrusters are sort of, if you want to stop the ship in a automated fashion, you can turn these on and it'll bring the ship to a stop as long as you turn off the gravity drive, and also so you can rotate the ship and drive it from the back here. It's useful to have the thrusters, but we also have tons and tons of gyroscopes right here for all of that. If we're to go ahead and roll ourselves backwards and look at the back of the ship, we do also have some propulsion on it and a connection point, so if we want to transfer items through it, we can. If we were to hop into Spectator and go ahead and fly into the ship's inner workings, you'll see that we actually have some storage in here if you wanted some storage, and a bunch of reactors actually hooked up properly through here. In fact, if we were to continue flying through this, you'll see we even have reactors in here hooked up. Now, the front and back of the ship, even though these are conveyor hinges, are not actually connected together through a conveyor system. So the front of the ship has its own systems. You'll also notice currently there's some serious LOD issues with the game where unfortunately the merge blocks that I use to connect the pieces together, when you get far enough away, they currently load in big ugly squares, sort of ruining the look of the ship. But if we come up close, you can see I did go ahead and make this pretty nice looking setup here. And if we were to look inside of it, you'll see that there's a large chunk of artificial masses, followed by a bunch of gyroscopes here, so I have it set up so it can maneuver that, as well as a reactor or 4 scattered around it in case things go wrong. This little section will still be able to have its own power supply, and we do have another seat at the front of the ship. Also, you might notice that at the back we had a lot of color-coded lights. I color-coded it so green is on the right, red is on the left, I put white on the top, and blue on the bottom. I know the red and green are correct for aircraft, not sure about the top and bottom, not sure they really have colors to distinguish those necessarily, considering all you really need is the right and left, and you'll be able to figure out up and down from there. Anyway, only thing left to show is this right here. It is where we have, well, it's actually what we started with. It's a reactor, a gravity generator, since you cannot have gravity generators on small ships without a mod, and I didn't want to use too many mods for this. And then we have an artificial mass block here, a rotor, and then the rotor set to have the small rotor head on it, which connects into the rest of the ship. And of course, it's pretty straightforward from there. Anyway, now that we've shown off the ship, I can go ahead and show you how it grew up to be what it is before we actually go ahead and fly it about. That's where all this sort of interesting little wreckage comes in to play. I say wreckage. Unfortunately, we do have issues where that massive solar flare, the glare on the screen, whatever you want to call it, the lens flare, ends up popping through a lot of things, so it's, well, it's the most annoying thing I've ever seen in this game in a while. But you can see we did have a few iterations of the ship. In fact, earlier versions of the ship, the hinges were able to flip all over the place. I've actually locked them to have a limited degree of freedom, so it should keep this sort of shape. Earlier ones didn't have that. If we were to continue on moving backwards through these, you'll even see earlier ones had much longer conveyor sections. But what I found would happen with these, especially since they didn't have limited angles of turning, they would end up locking just straight between the front and back, and then you'd have a lot of spare ones flailing about, not actually adding anything to the ship. And you can see we just have some of the very first simple ones here. I also do have a few, if we were to fly over here, simple ships that we use to grab pieces and move them about, as well as this guy right here, where I actually just use that long pole to position those things where I want it by nudging. Anyway, enough of that. If you want to see how I really built this, check out my stream. I did stream a lot of the basic building of it, but then I went ahead and beautified this over a day or two more. Anyway, let's go ahead and take a screenshot. Alrighty, so we are now inside the ship, and we can go ahead and just turn on the gravity drive by pressing the 1 and 2 keys. So now the gravity drive is on, and in fact we can turn it back off. And you'll see that ship will actually slow down because of the inertial dampeners. You can turn those off, of course. Turn it back on. It'll go ahead and pull and start getting the ship moving. turn these off, and now we can drift for a while. You are seeing some speed decrease, oddly enough, but overall the ship should carry on at roughly the same speed now that we are free floating with the inertial dampeners off. I did also set it up so that we can press our number 4 key, and we are now in a remote control over the front section. And you can it's hard to see, but the front section is now turning. So if we had gone ahead and left the artificial masses on, we'd actually be able to turn the ship more easily. But we are aiming it a little bit here. The main way I have it set up, and it's the reason why you saw all those gyroscopes in there, is that way, even though we are in the back, and even though we're not remote controlling the front, we can do a control 2. And I have all these keys here. The 1 and 2 keys are left and right, and 4 and 5 are up and down. So you can actually control everything from here. So let's go ahead and turn back on that gravity drive to our control 2. And now just the front of the chariot is pulling us along through space. So it's actually pulling us to turn us. Now, we do have a problem with this where if the ship gets up to maximum speed, we run into the, well, rather unfortunate happenstance where safety locks are now a thing in this game. And there's no way, as far as I know, to disable safety locks. So you end up with the ship locking all of those hinges into place, and we'll no longer be able to go ahead and control everything. Well, we will be able to, but it'll be locked. So control basically like a ship. And at that point, we could just use the mouse and use the gyroscopes we have at the back of the ship to control it all. Right now, I'm just using those number keys down at the bottom to control it. We don't have any actual spin controls for it, but I think it's pretty dang nifty. And out of anything I've built with rotors, or in this case hinges, this is probably the most stable thing I've actually built. I spent an awful lot of time sort of refining it that way. Hopefully, all of this doesn't explode in 2 seconds. That said, I have found that it will still explode, particularly if we do get to that maximum speed. It can become very problematic. So right here, you can see I'm turning it, and I have the gravity drive turned off. It can sometimes also be problematic if we try to turn the ship while the gravity drive is disabled, I found. Not exactly sure why that is, but I think it's something about it's able to actually turn faster than the hinges can catch up, something of that sort. Not really putting it into words too well. Anyway, let's go ahead. We'll get up to that maximum speed. We're now basically going in an opposite direction to what we were going. I enjoy controlling it this way. It's pretty simple. I should say, actually, I can demonstrate that now if we shut that off. You can actually control it the old-fashioned way from just at the back. I believe I mentioned that earlier. We can use our left key and sort of turn to the left, and you'll see it pulls the whole thing along. You have to be cautious. Or our right key and sort of pull to the right, and it pulls the drive. I call it the gravity engine over this way. Or, you know, our up key. And as you can see, it pretty much pulls the engine up to where we want it, and then of course the engine is pulling us along. An interesting little way of doing things. And of course we could do Q and E and rotate ourselves around and enjoy the hinges torquing a little bit, but overall the ship is holding together pretty well. Acceleration isn't the most in the world, but that could always be tweaked in the future to add either more gravity generators or more artificial masses. That said, you might need to tweak the power supply a bit more if you do that. Oh, by the way, number 3 key also just turns off the rotors on our little ship at the back if we want to disable those. Anyway, that is the ship. As always, it'll be up on the Steam Workshop if you want to go ahead and get your hands on it. Uh-oh, here we go. I think oh, sugar. Ooh, sugar. I think we were just getting very close to the maximum speed there when we turned it the other way. So I think the artificial masses might have locked or not the artificial masses, the hinges might have locked and then unlocked suddenly. Oh boy, that was spooky, eh? But yeah, here we go, getting close up to that speed, and I think they might have just locked, yeah. So now you can see, I can go ahead and turn basically the whole ship as if it was just a static ship. You could, of course, have gone into the K screen, just selected hinges, and just told them all to turn on the safety lock if you want to just fly the ship like this, as if it is one big thing just with a bunch of permanently frozen hinges. Of course, that sort of defeats the fun, doesn't it? Anyway, let's go ahead and shut those off, turn on our inertial dampeners, and begin slowing ourselves down. And you can see there, as we come back into standard, speeds, and the safety locks disengage, that is when the rotors decide, some of them, to break themselves. Not when we were changing directions or anything, but when the rotors are changing from safety locks on and off. Dangerous thing, safety locks. I'm not sure they really help out, honestly. I think just a soft limit for the maximum speed of things would be far better than safety locks. That way things could maybe go faster than the maximum speed without causing too much of an issue. But you couldn't actually propel a ship faster than that necessarily. Soft limit is what I'm saying. Anyway, that is the ship. Hope you like it. We're still slowing up. I can go ahead and actually push forward a little bit more and then brake again. And you'll see some of the weirdness that can happen and how these things jiggle. But you can see, because I did set their limits, they don't necessarily explode or anything too weird like that. And of course, if they do end up colliding together, the two central sections, there is some heavy metal there, so it won't necessarily destroy your whole ship instantaneously. Yeah, I think the ship works pretty well, honestly. If you want to see it blow up real quick, the easiest way to do that probably, let's turn on our gravity drive, turn off our inertial dampeners, do Control 2, and we can basically go ahead and just turn on some of these things here. So there we go. And now it's wanting to turn one way, and we could go ahead and now try to turn the other way with our little ship here. And we can force some troubles here, where now we've collided and we're having some braking issues. Now, the ship, of course, would look much better if those damn LODs weren't making the whole front section so blocky. As you can see, it's supposed to look a lot nicer. And originally, I was going to have it so you could just press a button and it would break free the whole front section there. It's almost an escape pod. The whole gravity drive would fly off on its own. But those little lights I put around the edges there ended up actually merging. Well, the lights act as their own holder. They connect the merge blocks to the main ship, so I cannot actually just jettison all of these like I was originally hoping to. Anyway, you can see that, oddly enough, didn't cause us the grief I thought. Did break a few things. We can go ahead and actually just switch the rotors now, and it'll go the gyroscopes will go flying back the other way, but you all see we also lost the gravity drive itself. The gravity generator on the inside went flying at some point, and I completely missed that. Anyway, I think it's an interesting ship. You can see it has some, I don't know, I would consider it pretty decent stability, honestly, considering what we're doing, and it's not completely blowing up. But, of course, if I use the arrow keys at the back, I can cause complete and utter chaos if you're not cautious. So, I would suggest sticking to using the Control 2 and all the button keys I have set up down there to drive the ship, well, in a more reasonable manner instead of the nonsense I've just done. Anyway, that is it. A bit of waffling, bit of rambling, but yeah, that's the ship. It'll be up on the Steam Workshop if you want to get it. Link in the description down below. Thank you a bunch for watching, and I shall see you all next time. Ta-ta.